I feel like it's like the ball getting ready to drop on New Year's Eve with this countdown here at the bottom in the purple. Very exciting.
Oh, I didn't even see that. That is
I thought it was people.
I didn't either.
Like,
oh my gosh.
Dropping like flies.
Yeah, perfect.
Nope, slightly different. Amazing, amazing. Good afternoon, Boston Startup Week. My name is Allison Sproul, and I am one of your organizers here. On my screen, you'll see the sessions that are happening right now. Currently, you are logged in to watch People Ops 101, getting started and navigating your career in People Ops. If that is not the session you're hoping to join, then what you need to do is click the little agenda button at the top of your screen here and navigate accordingly to where you are hoping to be. Quick note before I pass things over to our lovely moderator, Yeja, and also while we're waiting for people to navigate around, just as a reminder, we absolutely love questions. And so please use that Q&A tab on the far right of your screen to submit any questions you have during the session. That's why we created this conference, ultimately, to get your questions. So please do direct them over to the Q&A, and we'll save some time at the end for our amazing group of panelists to dive into those. And then also, spicy, we have an awesome social media competition happening right now. So in short, you'll want to pay attention to what your speakers are saying. And if you quote something really awesome on social media using the hashtag SBW2021, you will then be entered to win one of 5 $100 gift cards to a Black-owned Boston business. So, love to hear it. Please don't be afraid to tweet, put it on LinkedIn, Facebook, what have you. Again, that is hashtag SBW2021. And with that, I will toss things over to our amazing moderator, Yeja.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Yeja. I'm a People Ops Associate at OwnUp, which is a fintech startup in Boston. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm definitely excited and honored to be here with this panel of great leaders in the People Ops community. And I will have everybody introduce themselves. So their name, their pronouns, their role, and kind of what they're doing in their current work, just to give people an overview. So I'll throw it first to Lindsay.
Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks, Yeja. Lindsay Simpson. I am head of talent acquisition over at Starry, and we are an internet service provider in very much a growth stage. So we are building and scaling our teams, and just really excited to be here today with all of you.
Awesome. How about Ryan?
Thanks, Yeja. I'm Ryan Harms. I'm VP People Operations at Piaggio Fast Forward. It is a robotic startup in Boston. I've spent the last almost 5 years there running our talent, people, and office operations functions and teams.
Thank you. And Jana?
My name is Jana. I lead people and culture at ZMags. We're a startup in the e-commerce space here in Boston. I use she, her pronouns, and I lead and do everything People Ops for our wonderful team.
Last but certainly not least, Amari.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amari Aarons. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the founder and managing partner of the Aarons Group, a diversity inclusion workplace consulting firm, which I started after 15 years, mostly of human resources experience in Fortune 500 companies. So glad to be with us today.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have some questions that we've pre-established that we'll answer, but really the focus of this is getting started and navigating your career in People Ops. So our first one that we're going to start with is, how did you get started in people operations? Lindsay, do you want to jump in and answer this one?
Sure, absolutely. So Lindsay, she, her, I think I missed that earlier. But I graduated with a communications degree. So I found my career in People Ops pretty early on, actually. I had my first taste of, I guess, back then we referred HR by working as a retail manager at The Gap, and really just sparked my interest in both recruiting and human resources, and just creating an experience for people. It was really rewarding to match talent with opportunity. And I was hooked, quite frankly. So after spending some time with the Gap doing recruiting and onboarding, I found myself back in PR for a little bit, representing entrepreneurs here locally. And I just loved representing opportunity and truly that for people. When I had an opportunity to come and build in tech, I just said absolutely. And so I spent the prior 5.5 years at a growth stage startup, both in talent acquisition as well as people operations. And it was just really rewarding to not only be able to provide opportunity and share, new businesses and really, really innovative products to the marketplace, but also to really get at the heart of the employee experience. So spending time on both sides, it's been really, really exciting, but I definitely found my path, I think more broadly, I would say in talent.
Awesome. Yeah, I find that people come to people operations. It's a relatively new field, and we'll kind of talk about that, but there's so many different pathways that take us there. And Mari, do you want to share yours?
Yeah, I ended up, I would say, not quite by accident, but my path, I started in a college hire executive development program when I worked for Macy's. And as one of the rotations that I had was placed in a learning and development role where I was leading facilitation workshops in different Macy's and Bloomingdale's stores coast to coast, and just loved it. Loved not just imparting the content of the courses, but more than that, by being in all these different rooms across the U.S. What I was realizing was that people were seeking connection to the workplace and to each other. They were looking for policies and practices that really just made sense for the way that their lives were living and the way that the stores were operating. And there was a disconnect sometimes between the people who worked in corporate offices and corporate headquarters like me, who would come out and visit offices, and people who worked in our field operations, who were interacting with our customers day in and day out. And I saw really an opportunity for me to help play a role in bridging that gap. And so that's what led me really to exploring other human resources functions, and just being able to have a career in this space, which has continued to just grow and evolve even in the 15 years that I've been in the space.
Thank you. And Ryan, would you like to share how you got into people ops and your story there?
Yes, thanks, Yeja. It was, I'd say, a natural progression for me. When I came to Boston, I got into startups in the early stages. And I feel like when that happens, basically, if you're not engineering, you're sort of everything else. So I got exposed to a lot of roles. And I was really drawn to people operations because I felt it had a big impact on shaping the business and being able to help your colleagues and employees. I really love that Lindsay used the phrase where talent meets opportunity. I think that's a great way to put it. And it was just really continuing to identify where those gaps were and take on more responsibility in those areas. For anybody looking to get into people ops, if you don't have an in with just getting a role in people ops, but are interested, ask for a project. Is there something on somebody's plate that you can help with as a one-off or get exposed to? I guarantee there's something that somebody needs help with or you can help tackle.
Awesome. Thank you. And we know that, product is the forefront of a lot of businesses, but people are behind the product. That's what drives people operations. But it's built on human resources in some way. It's new, the same, it has some of the same functions. So our next question is kind of, in what ways does people operations build on or vary from traditional human resources? Ryan, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. I think there are two parts to this. First, I think human resources is traditionally thought of as doing the employee paperwork for the business, the benefits, the payroll, making sure the I-9s are compliant, more of that old school admin for the business type mentality. And I also think traditionally there's this perception that HR is only there to protect the business, not the employees, and be, sort of the fun police. And I think people operations has really grown into being more of a strategic part of the business, far beyond the admin paperwork. Leveraged right, it can truly cause a business to flourish. And that's strategic in terms of talent and engagement, business planning. What's the total benefits packages? What's the employer branding? How can we develop learning and development for the employees. So truly diving into every aspect of a people operations team. And I think people operations has really evolved from the big brother who just protects the business. I feel a good people operation team also advocates for the employees. And there are plenty of instances where protecting the business also protects the employees, but having great engagement, happy, productive employees, opportunities for growth, a safe space, a good people operations team is going to be successful at balancing the business needs and the employees' needs, because you can't really have one without the other.
Certainly. I think there's definitely been this growth over the last 15 years. The future of work, you do more studies, you learn what people want, how they're connecting to business. And I think People Ops has been a response to that, like responding to how people are viewing their work and that shifting in the workplace. But in a lot of ways, People Ops is a lot of functions. And if you're a team of one, you must know that. And I hope some of us have some teams, but we are a team of one in some cases. But could you walk me through the different components of a People Ops team? You have benefits, talent acquisition, learning development, HRS, all these functions. Omari, do you want to share?
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? Like Ryan actually just really beautifully outlined this for us, and so did you, Yeja, with just kind of going through those different areas. I think about in 2005, particularly off of what Ryan was just saying, there was an article that came out on why we hate HR. And it really was that, people were thinking of HR, and in many ways, HR had become this default place for compliance and for dealing with bad actors within an organization. And so People Ops, I think, has really a lot of the same components of traditional HR, thinking about recruiting, right? Like, how do you bring people into your company? But not just recruiting in terms of making sure the job postings have the right, most inclusive language and that you're posting them with the right organizations, but really thinking about talent brand, right? I think talent brand is a really interesting way in which we are shifting from traditional HR to people operations. And so that's thinking about where are the places that our brand should be present? What are events that we should be sponsoring as an organization? Where should we be buying tables to different events? What are the types of activities that we should be doing? What does our website, showcase and tell about our culture that's not just about the product or the work that we're doing exclusively, right? So there's a partnership, I would say, between the traditional functions of HR, like recruiting, with the functions of People Ops, like talent brand. And the other example I would use here is thinking about development. So the learning and development function, I would say, which is how I came into HR, was very much built into this, hierarchy of different organizations, right? As a new employee at this level, here's new employee or learning and development, new employee orientation. For managers in the organization, here's training that you get when you first become a manager, and maybe there's some ongoing training, right? People operations, I would say, takes the spin that development and learning should be continuous and should be expansive. And that there's a number of different ways to do that, right? There's the traditional training courses. There's sending people out to different conferences and events like this, where the company can become a sponsor of something like Startup Boston Week. There's investment in mentorship and sponsoring programs. So thinking about the one-on-one relationship, and not just in terms of a more senior person who's got a VP or a director or chief title mentoring a more junior person, but also mentorship along the lines of functional mentoring and reverse mentoring, so that everyone has something to learn from someone else inside of the organization. So I think if you look at all the traditional functions around compensation, and benefits that HR is responsible for, you see people operations really tackling them as thinking about well-being, right? And like what really allows employees to bring their whole self to work and not have to worry about things like co-pays and not worry about time off policies and bereavement policies and things like that. People operations is what really serves as a breakthrough for the next stage, the next evolution of human resources.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I know it's a mouthful. There's a lot of functions there. I am on a small team, and I think I've had my hands in all of it in the 8 months I've kind of pivoted into People Ops. Are there anybody else that would like to share kind of about their experience of these various functions and build on what Omari said?
I think just that it's all interconnected. You know, as somebody who's focusing currently in talent, but has spent time as a business partner, I think that partnership is invaluable. You have to be at the heart of the employee experience to be able to present compelling and opportunities to the marketplace. And so I think it's just a really strong partnership and feedback loops that you have to have in your organization to say, we are investing in creating the experience for our people. So I'm actually part of the people experience team here at Starry, and I think you really have to earn that title, and you have to really invest in that. And so it's been really exciting to be building. We're very much in a growth stage. We don't get it all right. I think I'd like to say that we have safety to innovate and to try, but really at the heart of it is our people, and we try to design things to deliver on the promises to our people, be it opportunity or be it a fair and equitable interview process, or delivering with L&D and the promises of growth for your people. So I would just add, wherever you find yourself in the people ops umbrella, you're making an impact, and just having that collaboration with your team, you know, you can do things really together. And couldn't do it without my business partner team. And I think it really helps to understand what your culture is, what are you now, what's current, what's aspirational, and be able to really celebrate that and work towards that together.
I really like what you said about like people experience. So I think at every organization, you get to define what that looks like. And I'm curious if anybody here, I want to throw in a question, which is, how did you go about defining people experience at your organization? What was the way that you were able to kind of, I guess, land on an ethos of some sort?
And I don't know if that's me or anybody else wants to jump in, but I think it came by way for us. You know, we think about our people as our customers. So we have a customer experience team, and they are the heart of our business and what drives us every day to deliver better products and services for them. And I've always thought of our employees and our candidates as our customers. So it was really kind of a natural, I think, name for our team. And it's still something that is an evolution, if you will. It's something that we have to continue to iterate on. But I think at the core, you can always create an experience for people, and you can always make that investment and do it by way of intent and you know, and safety for everybody. And I think, as Ryan said earlier, you know, we are a strategic partner to the business, and your people are your most valuable asset to do that, to deliver these services and to delight your customers and to make products that are incredibly innovative. Your people are really at the heart of that. So I think that there's real work to do there, and it's really rewarding work. It's hard work, right? It's hard. I think you can see people through the best of times and the most challenging of times. And so I think that, you know, for me, having a team around you that can really lift you up and ground you at the same time is also really important. So anybody looking for, you know, a career in people ops, I would also just recommend to be curious and, you know, find that network of people, maybe in your company or also externally, where you have that safety and that support system, because it can be really, really challenging as much as it's rewarding.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay, for answering. Is there anyone that wants to add on to that?
I think just adding on to what Lindsay said, I think it's as much defined by your employees. You can't define that for a company without the input from them. And so I think whether you do that from a poll or just through natural interactions and the engagement within your team, I think it's short-sighted to just sort of decide values as a company or from the leadership level without that input from your employees.
That's really insightful. I think we often forget about that sometimes. We want to go forward with our projects, and sometimes doing surveys or getting feedback can be time consuming, but such a valuable aspect of hearing from people, their experience. That's what drives the word experience, our identities, and how we live. We talked about the various functions that you can find in people operations. But I'm curious, how did you find your path? You know, you have people operations, all these functions, but the path that leads us to our passions. Lindsay, would you like to answer this one?
Sure. Gosh, this is kind of a big question. I would say I was probably somebody who's destined to have a lot of jobs prior to landing at Star. I did a number of different roles, kind of all inside the people operations umbrella. And I have to say, I don't think I always knew what I wanted to be, but I knew who I wanted to be. And so every opportunity that came my way had to really fit within that of who I wanted to be. And so finding my path, quite frankly, came by way of saying yes, really, most of the time. So the first 15 years of my career, when something came my way and it was something that I could represent, the one thing I won't do is represent something I don't believe in. It's pretty simple, but it's something that's my North Star and has always been. So if I can get behind it, you have me 120%. And so I really just said yes to a lot of different things. I got comfortable with the uncomfortable. I was open about what I didn't know. And quite frankly, a lot of the positions I held, I think I had more to learn than I had to offer, quite frankly. And I just led with that. I think with that openness that I was excited for the opportunity. And then I think as you run so fast in growth stage startups, and if we're also grateful to be on this incredible growth path, you don't generally have a lot of time. But I would say that I really, really found my path when I took the time to reflect and to really look back to go forward. And that was just work that I had to do. It wasn't anything a mentor was going to solve for me. It was really a hard look and kind of reflection for me to say, what really lights you up? You know, what are the experiences that you've had that you run towards more? And what are the things that you're grateful to have experienced? But gosh, that's not filling your bucket in the same way anymore. And I think that's really how I found my path. And I just looked at every opportunity as truly just that. And I do try to do this reflection, you know, sometimes annually. I'm better at it than other times of the year, but really just take a pulse and say, is this still really serving the business? Is this still serving my team? And not leaving yourself out of that. I think that keeps you fired up. I think it keeps you working towards that next goal and keeps you in check. We put a lot of, I think, emotion and investment to work. I know that I get a lot of fulfillment through my career. And I'm going to give it my all. So I have to be honest with myself on where I can really serve best. And I think that that's really, really how I found my way, and just grateful for the people along the way that have honestly taken a chance on me and said, you know what, we're going to do this with you. And it's been incredible. I don't know what the next 10 years are going to bring. I have a new role here at Starry, a lot of growth and opportunity ahead, a ton to learn. And so I think for now, really on this path of recruiting and growth is really what serves me. But I'm really never anybody that says that, you know, this will be in perpetuity. So anywhere I can serve, I generally want to. And I just love delivering for everybody, our employees and people that we've yet to meet yet.
Certainly. I think what you said on reflection is so powerful and something I think in life we should do more, but in this role, because there's so many ways we can go, but listening to yourself and really what drives you, your passion, what makes you excited to get out of bed, it's going to be so important. And I found that, you know, how I end up when people off, so is that reflection. What I like the most is people. It's getting to know stories, it's celebrating those voices. And that's how I found myself in this field, but it was through reflection and just sitting down. Particularly in COVID times when pivots were quite common. And so building on that, where people perhaps taking new starts or making new pivots, what do you wish you knew about people ops before you started? Jonna, do you want to take this one first?
Sure thing. Excuse me. So, I mean, I feel like they're looking back and reflecting. You know, there's a lot. There's quite a bit I wish I kind of could go back and tell my younger self, my more junior self, I guess we'll say. And one of the things that sticks out is to really have patience, and there's so much to learn, right? There's so many different functional areas, as we kind of touched on earlier. And so kind of going along with with having patience, you know, not only just with the process, but with yourself and with your growth journey, because, you know, when you look around and you meet other people ops professionals, nobody has the same path, right? There's so many different areas that you can get involved in. Everybody's, you know, the organizations they join are different. Everything looks different. But it's wonderful because we're all, you know, kind of, you know, marching towards a common purpose of serving people and helping grow the business. And so, you know, having that patience and taking the time to just not rush things, I think would be something that I, you know, would love to have known, as well as, you know, you're not going to get everything right. Not everything goes to plan, you know, as much as we want and as much as we hope for, and we do all this planning up front, you know, kind of giving yourself kind of the grace in the room to say, hey, you know, this maybe didn't go as well as we thought, or we thought this was going to be the outcome of a particular project, or, you know, we thought we were going to be able to hold our retention or our time to hire at a certain number, and then it just doesn't happen. And so, you know, it's really important too when you're in that process of finding, your either your first people role or your, subsequent ones, is finding a group who welcomes learning and supports failing fast and saying, hey, this is a team effort, and again, we're not always going to get it all right, but we support learning, because even when you don't get it right, you still learn something from it. And so every time something doesn't go totally correct, you come out that much stronger on the other side. So having kind of the grace and the patience with yourself too. No one likes to say they make mistakes, but to have things maybe not go correctly. I think that would be something that I would have loved to have been told when I was starting that career.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate that in terms of that grace and patience. I can begin to explain when working with people, there's just so many ways things can shift and change, even based on your own estimations. So I think that's brilliant advice. Ryan, how about your insight? What do you wish you had known?
Yeah, I initially thought of some of the harder moments I've been met with, but after some thought, I really settled on the fact that knowing how wonderful the people ops community is. There are so many avenues where people ops people have come together to share their knowledge and experience and lean on each other through hard situations, some of which, Jonna touched upon as well. But like this last year with the pandemic, where there was so much changing so fast, the community really came together to share what they were doing and what they were seeing and what was working and what wasn't. So I wish I knew to lean into those communities even earlier and lean into the networking groups and the Slack groups and the LinkedIn connections, because your fellow people ops people are invaluable, and there's a lot of smart, talented people ops people out there. And this is a group of people that loves to help each other out as much as their organizations and their employees. So don't be afraid to jump into those.
That's great. I mean, it is a really deep pool of resources, and I've discovered that in my career is there's so many people willing to help, as you said, and I think that's incredible about this community. Omari, what do you wish you had known?
Oh, so many things, and everything that and everything that everyone has already said. What I would say, just to add to the conversation, is that when I started, I felt very much like I needed to stay within a certain amount of parameters, right? Like there was this box of guardrails that I was kind of locked into, and that when I would go to meetings and I would talk to business partners and I would talk to leaders in the organization, or even when I would talk to employees in the organization who had these requests, it was kind of like, well, you have this menu of options that's only like A, B, or C, and that's all you could do. So really what I wish I would have known was that I could challenge myself on finding ways to get to yes sooner, right? There's one of my mentors has this quote in her office that says, people say I'm a radical HR person, but I just think I'm reasonable. And for the most part, like when you ask people what they need in an organization, right? Like people don't come back and say, give me a Ferrari. They're asking for things that are actually reasonable. And I think there's a fear among leaders in particular that, like, if you open this door and say, tell us what you want, that people are going to ask us for things that, cost millions and millions of dollars that you just can't deliver. And now you'll have put out, kind of this thing of tell us what you want, and people will give you unreasonable requests that you're not able to fulfill. My experience has been that people are actually very reasonable with their requests in terms of what they expect from their employer. And so when you meet with someone or a business partner has a request that's not on the menu of options that you have, like that's prescribed in front of you, I wish I had given myself more permission earlier in my career to actually sit with that and go, let me make sure that I understand the nature of what you're asking and why, and then go back and really think about how can we get to yes on this, even if it's not exactly doing what it is that you've asked for. There's still a way to be able to meet the need.
I think that's really insightful. I think maybe goes back to the experience piece versus traditional HR or compliance, where you might pick from that list. But with experience, we're looking more holistically at the entire person and how can we get to yes? Is that going to affect their experience? Is it going to make them feel part of this community or change their experience in a positive way? And I think it connects back to that. And we are here at Startup Week Boston. So this next question is going to be focused on startups and people operations. But essentially, most startups focus heavily on product development, with good reason, but sometimes without investing in their people infrastructure. why is people ops essential for startups? Lindsay, I'll have you answer this question first.
Well, I think it is really because people are at the heart of your business. I think that I create the culture and the values and how you deliver to the market. So I think it's something that you have to continually invest in. And it's not a one-time exercise to understand where your company is or where it's going. And you, of course, have to have a product in the market that people want and want to purchase and be able to grow. But you need the people that are really invested to go on that next climb with you, especially at a growth stage startup. You're always at the starting point. You're never really at that finish line. And I think that's the exciting part of it, is there's always another challenge. There's always something to learn ahead. And you have to have your teams along with you, and they have to feel valued and feel recognized, and quite frankly, just to feel heard. I know something that Omari said really, I loved how you explained getting to yes. And I think something I wish I knew earlier was just, you can go off script a bit. People want to feel heard, and find a place for that to exist. And I think that's really how you're going to delight. But that's where I think your people have to be, where you really invest, and certainly understand the marketplace that you're building. And but I have found I'm very grateful for the experiences that I've had to date, both in the organizations I've been fortunate to be a part of, but also in the Boston people community. As Ryan said, and I think John has said as well, people are just so welcoming to share their experiences and to really provide safety, to be authentic and to be your whole self, and to say where you're at. So, maybe you haven't always made that investment. Maybe you were hyper focused on launching that first market. And I guess I would say, be kind to yourself. We don't all get it right. And you can always go back and say, I can do that better. I can do that differently. Gosh, I hope we all have that. So as much as I say, I guess with that question, businesses, focus on their product or other things. I hope that we all have safety to say, gosh, I think I need to do it this way. And never forgetting about the people. And if you have, own it and make your commitments that you're going to make change.
Certainly. Ryan, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I think it's such a mistake when I see businesses do this. I think a lot of startups get themselves into Band-Aid situations because they are lean on time or money or resources or all of it. And then it's so hard to overhaul that, but it's also hard getting people on board with change in the first place. So without doing those things early, you miss out on the opportunity to build those foundations and processes early. And you will also have to spend more time with potential change management in a sense. So then you're trying to get employees, managers, even leadership on board with some of these new processes and mindsets, and that can be its own battle. People ops is essential to startups because it has such a big impact on your recruiting, your retention, your business planning, the growth of your employees, when you're also not investing in your workforce in those ways. And, they'll think about how competitive is your package and how compliant are you, and what's your employer brand to attract the right talent. So it's really narrow-minded to only focus on your business from the product perspective, or even when there's a leadership role for every other department in the business except for people ops on the leadership team or C-suite. It really just shows where the business's priorities are at. So even if you're not in people ops and you're job searching, take a look at that, and it'll give you some insight into how much they value people and people operations within their organization and how they're thinking about that.
Awesome. Thank you. And Jonna, what's your insight? What do you think?
Those both had great, amazing points. And I think just to contribute, it is truly essential, like both Lindsay and Ryan said, to create the foundation, because if you have to play catch up and scale the people function or scale and I think one thing I see particularly is the people tech stack to match the demands of the business and the talent acquisition efforts that sort of come when you begin to, you have your product in market, and then it's time to kind of hit the gas pedal and either go into hyper growth or even just do some incremental growth. The backpedaling and the wasted time and resources that ends up inevitably happening, it can be really detrimental. And so you can see that, if you're super lean and you don't invest in not only the right group of people people, whatever the setup is that makes sense for your org, and you have the right people in place and the right leaders in place with, that are sitting on, with presence on the leadership team, and you have the right tech stack and the right abilities and tools to be able to, move with the business. As the business is ready to go, you can punch the gas pedal and you can support them right alongside them without missing a beat. And so that, I think, is just it's super important, but it's so underutilized. And I see time and time again, different, lean people teams kind of, I wouldn't say begging, but begging for tools, right? And so, sometimes it doesn't really, it doesn't get put in the budget until it's kind of almost feels like it's too late. And so, anybody listening, founders to be or founders, like, it's so important to make this such an exciting part of, the kind of the early stages of your company's journey.
Awesome. Thank you. This screen shifted for me, but I can still see your faces. So my next question, well, I was going to build on this because I think that MIT is a great resource. They kind of look at the future of work. They look at this Good Jobs initiative, but it goes back to the focus of when we create jobs that matter for people, they're excited to do the work no matter what it is. And kind of taking that into account for people ops is that people are so focused on their experience. If you can create good jobs off the bat, it's going to change the function organization, the work they're doing, the development they can do, the product they can make. And I think that ties into everything you said, which was like really brilliant. My next question for you is going to be back to, we have some questions in the Q&A that link to this, but what skills or qualities would make somebody successful in a people ops role? I will throw it over to Ryan.
Great. I think it depends on the role, like, a recruiting role versus payroll and benefits specialist. But overall, for me, the soft skills are key. A high EQ, that emotional intelligence, they are really hard to teach and to learn. So good communication, a strong maturity, empathy, the ability to see and understand different perspectives, because oftentimes you're trying to get those different perspectives to come together and compromise. Other things I think are important are just, being able to be fair across the board. In so many situations, employees think like, oh, it's just me, it's fine. But if you do it for one, really, if you're thinking as the organization as a whole, how does that have implications across the board? Having integrity and discretion to handle sensitive matters, to be able to be objective in most situations, being able to put the whole over the team, over the individual or yourself. And if you're interviewing, right, it's sort of hard to look at a resume and see, soft skills on a resume and be able to judge those. So be prepared with examples that show these to people you're interviewing with.
Thank you. And Ryan, what do you think are some, Ryan, you just answered. Sorry, my apologies. Jonna, what are some skills or qualities that you think would make somebody successful in a people ops role?
So I think a quality that is, I wouldn't say it's overlooked, but I think it's a really good one to point out is, one of the things that you hear people say when they're, interviewing for a people role or, they want to join people ops is that they're a people person and they're super interested in people. But another part, the other half of this that I think is even more important is that having an interest in business and having an interest in how businesses run and organizations. And because the reality here is, we are the people, right? We are handling the entire employee life cycle. We are driving that entire journey for folks. But we are also, a huge part of the business. We serve the business. And so we are basically using our expertise in people to make ourselves the best strategic business partners possible. So having that innate love or interest in how businesses work and what the back end looks like and how you can use your skills as a people ops professional to push the business forward, that's something that I think is super critical and a great quality to have, especially as you're getting ready to join a people team.
Really. And building on this, and anybody can answer, is what are some accreditations or certifications? That was one in the chat, but I think connects well to this topic, that would be useful for somebody to have in people ops. And I think part two, if you want to answer that instead, is if somebody was trying to go back to school or is planning on like maybe taken a class, what function or subject would that be tied to?
I'm happy to start here. So here's what I'll say, and I'm a believer in formal education, and I love certifications and all of these things as well. What I want to always caution people on when they ask, like, what do I specifically need to go get in order to do this? I think SHRM is a wonderful organization. They're doing amazing work. Their president, Johnny Taylor, just came out with a new book that I'm really excited to read called Reset. So, wonderful organizations out there. Also, I'm a member of the Association for Talent Development, which initially started as the American Society for Training and Development and then rebranded. There are so many really great, the National African Association of African Americans in Human Resources, I'm a member of as well. There's a lot of really great organizations out there. I would say the key is more so than any specific certification, and there definitely are some, depending on what you're interested in doing, is this notion of continuous and expansive learning, right? The field continues to shift. It continues to push as we think about how people see themselves and show up in the world. 10 years ago, people introducing themselves on a panel using pronouns was not extremely common, right? And now I think we notice when it doesn't happen. That's an example of how the world is shifting and how quickly it moves. And so I think being able to stay up to date, reading articles, find the sources for yourself, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, McKinsey, like, whoever it is for you that speaks your language and really challenges your thinking. Find sources for you to be able to stay up to date on what's happening in the field and to be able to think ahead, right? The biggest thing, and I do a lot of mentorship with kids, the biggest value of a college degree is teaching you how to think. More so than any, for the lawyers and the doctors, like, I'm glad that they have a whole lot of school, right? But for the rest of us, right, it's really teaching you how to think, because when you encounter a situation and you can Google, here's how you do this, it's a 1, 2, 3 step process, right? Something goes wrong with this iPhone and I Google, somebody else has already figured it out. That's really simple. That's really easy. There's no challenge there for me. In people operations, you're consistently and frequently going to encounter situations where there is no rule book, there is no 1, 2, 3 option. There's no one, you haven't encountered this before, particularly in the sense of a startup. And that's why the community is really important. That's why having sources of people to talk to, places where you can go and put together information that you got from this article and this article and that article to be able to inform an approach that you might take. So the continuous and expansive learning, I would say, is probably the most important certification. And that's the one that ultimately is up to you.
That's incredibly insightful. And I would have to agree. I think I've surged and was like, do I just want to read an article or do I want to study for this test? You'll find your pathway, I think, about what's more appealing. But there are options. Does anyone else want to build on what Amari said?
I think he nailed it for me. So
same.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, then we'll kind of pivot a little bit and talk a little about some functions that have been prominent. Our guest topics have been prominent within the last year. And one of these is kind of going to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that's been something that's been a focus, right? For a lot of reasons, the past year, organizations are dedicating more resources toward it. But how should individuals understand the role of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Sometimes that shifts within people operations. Amari, would you like to answer this one?
Absolutely. And I love talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, liberation, right? Like all the letters. Whenever I'm talking to people in the startup world, because I think it really lands on something that people in the startup space understand really, really well, and perhaps better than some of the traditional business leaders. And that's innovation. Right? What we are all after is the next big or small idea that changes the world. And what all of the folks who went and spent a lot of time in school and got all the advanced degrees and certifications, who are neuroscientists, tell us is that when people feel safe, when they have psychological safety, they're able to do their best work because they're not under guard, they're not under threat, They're in an environment that rewards them in the way that they think and the way that they act. They're able to bring their whole self to work and not operating under threat, not operating under guard, being able to be your full self and bring your full intelligence to bear, to use imagination as your core skill set in a team where you feel like you can share the idea and say, maybe this won't get us anywhere. Maybe this is a stupid idea, right? But have people be able to respond positively and affirmatively to that. That is the environment that creates innovation. And innovation is that environment that leads to the next best thing. Where traditional companies, I think, have really struggled with this is that a lot of times people like me, who are DEI consultants and HR leaders, have really framed the business case for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging by explicitly tying it to financial metrics. So yes, all the research and all the metrics that are out there around DEI are true, that when teams are more gender diverse, when they're more racially diverse, right, like the perspectives that are in the room do lead to companies being more profitable. But that is about having safety, right? It's not being the one person of color in the room. It's not being the one woman in the room. And that is the place where women in particular, there's a lot of research that shows women feel more comfortable speaking up, knowing that they have an advocate at the table, right, in another woman. That allows people around the table, particularly when it's predominantly men, to be able to hear women in a different way, right? To actually hear what women are saying. There's a lot of research that say men can't, actually don't hear women when they speak. And so when you have more people and you have a community at the table that's representative of the population that you're trying to serve, then you have different voices, perspectives, you have the culture and the climate needed to create psychological safety and that sense of belonging that leads to innovation. So critically important for everyone, every business, every organization, whether you're a Fortune 100 company or you're a nonprofit or an LLC of 3, right? But for you all in the startup world who are watching, it's critically important because you're all about the next best thing, whether that's a big idea or a small idea that's going to change the world. And so DEI is definitely the pathway forward for you.
Awesome. Thank you. That was really insightful. And I think incredibly tied to people ops, the people experience. We come with all our identities to the workplace, and to see those reflected, celebrated. I think you mentioned heard earlier. That's like a huge component, and right, and being valued. And I think that ties in really well into this people function. That was kind of the set of questions we had, and I realized I want to be cognizant of time and move into the Q&A portion. And we have a lot of questions that were submitted, which is amazing. And I will say for folks that are watching, you can upvote questions because we will kind of answer based on the upvotes. So something you want to see answered, put those thumbs up and we'll make that a priority. And our first one we have here, and now let's move it around. It's from Kendrick. And the question is mostly for Jonna, but for anyone who serves as a team of one, what are some critical emerging factors for prospective or new people ops professionals to prioritize as they enter a company culture? How do they rate their importance, like an EMF1 to EMF5? I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if other folks on the panel are.
All right, so for a team of one, right? So critical and emerging factors for people ops professionals. So prioritization is what I'm taking away from this. So I mean, in terms of, and so for EMF, I'm wondering if you mean maybe you talk about EMPS scores potentially. But so for just in terms of like prioritizing as you enter an organization as a people ops professional, specifically if you're going to join as a department of one, which I have done more than once and still am. So what I would recommend is you really spend those first 30, 60, 90 days building relationships and really getting to know people. Prioritize a lot of learning, less necessarily, from what my experience, sort of sharing or trying to fix. And so if you kind of take the first 30 and 60, 90 days to really absorb things like a sponge and get to know that maybe it's specific teams that you're going to be servicing and working with, or get to know the different you want to get to know your different cross-functional stakeholders, and just really kind of try to take that time to understand everything that you possibly can. That way you can really have a solid foundation, build that trust, and feel super successful in your, in your role going forward. I'm hoping that was close and helped kind of answer that question.
Thank you. On our next one, kind of we spoke to this, but what communities or groups do you recommend to connect with resources online? Anybody feel free to hop into this one. We might probably have overlapping resources, I would think.
Sure. I'd say definitely there's a lot of emerging Slack communities for sure to join and be a part of. I'm also a huge fan of the First Round Network. They have a lot of really interesting articles and, as somebody in the space, I'd say recommending anybody who wants to get into people ops, you have to be, I would say, resourceful. So it's a great, really community, especially of early stage companies. So I recommend First Round. And then I would say, Harvard Business Review as well, just, from a learnings perspective. I don't know if I'd consider that necessarily a group, but I think there's just some really interesting opportunities and articles and things that are brought forth in that publication as well. So those are kind of my three go-tos, I'd say.
Yeah, I love the Pops United Slack group. That's a great one to join. She Geeks Out Slack group is a great one to join. I also love just being on the SHRM boards. If you're a SHRM member, you can get into those open discussion or member boards if you have a question. I love just perusing them as well to see how other people have handled situations that maybe I haven't come across yet, but I could in the future. Or it just gets me thinking of how to do things better in my organization or things to stay away from. I think are just as important to learn, mistakes not to fall into if you can learn those from others before you make them yourself.
I think I have one more to add is Underscore too. They have a wonderful, wonderful people community. So grateful to be a part of it, especially in the last year. I think they've built up a really great community in a really challenging time for the world. And it's one that's really close to my heart for sure.
Okay. I will add in there Lattice Resources for Humans. They have a Slack channel that has been my kind of go-to. It's expansive, and I find that the search function, you can really, again, search situations you're in or just peruse and learn and see what other people are doing and just again, be resourceful, cue that information for later until you come across it yourself.
Yeah.
They're having a great event tomorrow too. Lattice is having a great HR event tomorrow. So something people could get involved in.
My team and I really love Life Labs as well. They come with a very psychology-based background, and they often hold free sessions on how to have good one-on-ones, how to do engagement in your org, how to sort of communicate well or deal with conflict. So they've got lots of great topics that are easy to jump into.
Our next question from Olivia, who I will be honest is my manager, so I'm happy that she's here. What networking tips do you recommend to new professionals looking to make meaningful connections in their careers?
I'm happy to jump in on this one. I think LinkedIn is such an incredible resource, and I'm still a young person, but old enough to remember when LinkedIn didn't exist coming into my career, and just how easy it is to find people, who have the title that you're looking for, to be able to join the communities that exist on LinkedIn as well. I generally have found that as I reach out to people on LinkedIn and I say, hey, can I bug you for a few minutes to just ask you a couple of questions about said topic, or I've got a situation that's going on and I'd love to get your advice, and you seem like a person from your profile that might be able to help me. People have been very willing to give me a 15-minute conversation. And in some cases that has turned into friendships, that's turned into business relationships and business partnerships. Particularly now that I'm on the consulting side, it's turned into consulting opportunities, right? So, it's very easy to find people if you go looking in the right spaces. And I think LinkedIn is a perfect example of that as a community where people are generally very responsive if you approach them in the right way. If you send a connection request with, why are you reaching out and what are you after? It makes people less suspicious, and people are generally very happy to engage with you.
I agree with Amari with LinkedIn. I also think you can do that on the Slack groups. I know in the last year where everything shifted remote and there wasn't sort of networking events that you could go to, or you couldn't take someone to coffee. I particularly went into some Slack groups, and there was an area of people operations that I wanted to learn more about. And I was like, hey, anyone in this profession or this area of people ops, like, I would love to shoot you a $10 Starbucks or Dunk's gift card, and like we can have virtual coffee, and I would love to chat with you for 15 to 20 minutes. And I easily got half a dozen people within a day that were willing to just hop on a quick 15-20 minute Zoom. Don't make it overwhelming. Don't be like, I want it to be an hour, twice a week. But I think if you keep it simple and you keep those connections real, people are always willing to have a conversation.
I love the virtual coffees and just finding your group, finding what works for you. You might try different groups and networks, but I'd say my piece of advice is to commit to it and make time for this learning, because in growth stage companies, it's sometimes, I know for me, it's the first thing that I said, oh gosh, I can't make it. And I always regret that. And I always come out with something I didn't know when I get outside of the world I live in every day. So I would just say, make a commitment in something that you think you can stick with, and zoom out when the days get really busy and say, gosh, can I do this 6 times a year? Like, yes, I can. And just really, challenge yourself when you're going to say no to that meeting that you worked hard to be a part of. So
I think that's good. Like, setting a goal is so important to connect. As somebody that graduated pretty recently, I found it was anxiety inducing to message people on LinkedIn and be like, I don't know. And there's plenty of resources out there to give some tips and tricks, but I think setting a goal for yourself can really help overcome maybe that anxiety that if you're new and pivoting and making new connections. I think we have time for maybe about 1 or 2 more questions. Our next one comes from Patrick. What are some resources or tools for you or your team that you use for employee engagement or employer branding?
So I can take this a little bit around the engagement tools, which is one of the areas that I love the most. So for engagement, there's quite a few different options out there. And, no surprise, I think a lot of it kind of has to do with, kind of what budget you have, right, for some of these tools. Starting out sort of early, if you're at an earlier stage seed round or, early stage company, maybe you don't have quite as many dollars allocated towards that. So for tools, you could use something as simple as, a Google or Microsoft Forms. You can also use SurveyMonkey, which works fine. But then as you, continue to grow and you want some more robust reporting and you want some, kind of other functionalities, you can look at tools like CultureAmp, like Lattice. There's lots of different ones out there that you can choose from, all that are excellent. And certainly I would say, you don't have to be impactful and to collect employee sentiment and to create actionable, takeaways from it. You don't necessarily need to have the best tools. So I've certainly done it by hand and done kind of all the math by hand too. So it's, as long as you have something that can capture kind of a survey, you're in business.
Any other insights, particularly maybe around, I guess, maybe employer branding? Because I know that's important in sense of recruiting or talent acquisition. And there might not be tools, but perhaps a strategy that you take.
For employer branding, I love to use Built in Boston, Venture Fizz. Glassdoor is always a great one. Everyone usually takes a peek at your profile prior to interviews, seeing what people are saying about your company. You can post jobs to Bostino. So where is your industry at? What are you looking for? And what are those best places to target your candidates and the people you want to know about your business? And I think the Boston tech community has a lot of great avenues, like some of the ones I mentioned, that you can utilize to do that with.
Another one too. Oop.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we are getting close to wrapping up. So unfortunately, we won't be able to get to all of the questions today. Do feel free to click into the panelist profiles at the bottom. It does connect to their LinkedIn, so you can send them requests on there. One other employer branding platform that I don't think gets enough credit is Comparably. because you can win awards for them that you don't actually pay for. So many awards like Glassdoor you have to pay for, which drives me nuts. So anyways, back to Omari.
No, I was going to say, this is another area, particularly, we were just talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. NSBE Boston, National Society of Black Engineers, Boston, incredible opportunities for employer branding. So if you're looking in particular industries, I'm familiar with several different organizations. Alpha Boston is one. There's NSBE, there's NABA, there's National Black MBA, there's Ascend, right? So there's a number of them out there that if you're looking for other opportunities for employer branding, particularly in communities that you're trying to target, communities of color, women, LGBTQ+, right? There are definitely organizations that you can partner with as well to get your name out there and to get incredibly talented, highly qualified people that you might miss in other places.
What a great note for us to end on. Thank you so much to our amazing set of panelists here. Everyone else who is listening to this call, thank you for attending. We don't have just this for you today, though, so please do click that agenda button at the top and check out the rest of not only the People Ops track, but all of the other events that we have coming up for you here shortly. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.